This is the global version of the Honor Magic 7 Pro, and this is the Samsung S25 Ultra. In this video, we're going to test the photo and video capabilities of these two top camera phones on the market. Alright, folks, let's go!
Hey friends, this video was translated using a neural network, so the sound quality isn't the best. If you want to listen to the original sound from a smartphone and hear the audio recording test, just follow the link in the description to our original video.
Hey friends, and as always, our first test is the front camera. Honor Magic 7 Pro, 4K at 60 frames per second, and the Samsung S25 Ultra also shoots in 4K at 60 frames per second.
I'll definitely give a thumbs up to Honor for the ability to change the zoom on the front camera during video recording. When it comes to color accuracy, the Magic 7 Pro really does produce a brighter image. The skin tone turned out different, with the Honor being lighter and a bit orange, while the Samsung is darker. And I will give it personally. I prefer the more natural skin tones with the S25 Ultra. If we're talking about image quality, the Samsung is a bit better. Detailing of the face, while on the Honor some details are rubbed off. The Honor Magic 7 Pro does a better job with stabilization, while the Samsung has a rather shaky background.
Guys, one thing to note is that you can't activate HDR on the front camera of the Honor Magic 7 Pro. So, as a result, we can't achieve the maximum dynamic range. Right now, the picture looks really good, with the sun lighting up the background nicely. At the same time, there's less light on the face, compared to the background. And with the Samsung, I can easily turn on HDR and see how the picture will look. I'm going to do that now. And this is what the picture looks like on the Samsung with the HDR effect. So, ideally, when we have a good background, it should be well-defined. The sky, everything should look beautiful. On Samsung, the picture looks more natural, because Connor's picture is overexposed. Samsung, it's overexposed.
In HDR, Samsung's picture hasn't changed much, but neither have the conditions. We still don't have the most difficult ones to see the difference in dynamic range.
It looks like a nice picture. So basically, the face is well lit and the background too. True, it's a bit washed out. While on the Samsung S25 Ultra, I now have HDR, 4K, 60 frames per second enabled. True, my face is really dark, but the background looks just gorgeous. You can see everything, and the sky looks absolutely stunning. The picture, the background. I like it, but I think the face looks better on the Honor Magic 7 Pro. What do you think, guys? Make sure to leave your comments. And now on the Samsung S25 Ultra, I've turned off HDR, and this is how it looks. In the end, the face is now better lit, but so is the background. Now the background is all blown out, and so, those clouds are no longer visible. But you know, I actually think that like this. So it's better to shoot so that the face looks better. So what do you think, guys? Be sure to leave your comments. Hey friends, the next test is portrait photography video on the Honor Magic 7 Pro. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any portrait video shooting, meaning with the background blur effect. So on the front camera, just like on Huawei, unfortunately, this mode is missing. In this regard, Samsung is definitely 3 steps ahead of the Honor Magic 7 Pro, since the Samsung S25 Ultra can shoot such a picture in 4K at 30 frames per second.
With Honor, we see only a slight optical blur, but it still cannot replace a full-fledged portrait mode. Samsung's portrait photography looks great. The blur boundary is smooth, there are no halos, and the focus stays sharp. As for the specifications of the front cameras, the Honor Magic 7 Pro is equipped with a 50-megapixel Sony sensor with an f2.0 aperture, while the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra has a 12-megapixel Samsung sensor with an f2.2 aperture.
Right now, we're testing sound recording in really tough conditions. Friends, we have a powerful 6-lane road here. Powerful sound from the road. And it's really interesting to see how our little smartphones handle this, right? Here in the midst of such heavy traffic. How's my voice coming through? Is everything alright? Now we're going to record sound using the basic video app. How do you hear me at all? 1, 2, 3, testing the connection. 1, 2, 3. When there's a busy road, the sound is being picked up by all the microphones. On the Honor Magic 7 Pro, we have the option to record sound with noise cancellation effect. Alright, I just activated the noise cancellation. So now, in theory, the sound recording should be a lot better. Guys, make sure to drop a comment about what kind of sound you like more. And now I've activated the professional mode, recording video on the Samsung S25 Ultra. Right now, I'm only being recorded by the front microphone while on. In Honor Magic 7 Pro, such shooting cannot be activated, but I have now turned off noise reduction. How's my voice coming through? Is everything okay? There's a noisy road, a 6-lane busy road. And now on the Honor Magic 7 Pro, I'm going to turn on the noise cancellation. I just activated the noise cancellation. How do I sound now? Is everything okay? The road is busy. Cars are actively driving by. On the Samsung S25 Ultra, I'm recording everything with the front microphone. In theory, the sound recording quality should be really good on the Samsung S25 Ultra. But, again, let's also listen to how the sound is recorded on the Honor Magic 7 Pro. And now on the Samsung S25 Ultra, I've turned on the omnidirectional sound recording. It's the Honor Magic 7 Pro. I'm turning off the noise cancellation now. I should remind you that on the Samsung S25 Ultra, when you turn on the professional video recording, our dynamic range drops significantly, and the picture turns out like this. Unfortunately, the sky gets blown out. So, on the Honor Magic 7 Pro, this is the kind of picture you get, and honestly, I think it's pretty much the same.
Guys, Samsung, as usual, nailed the sound recording even in tough conditions. I really like the recording quality, both from the omnidirectional microphone and the front microphone. Honor's recording quality turned out to be worse. The background noise really drowns out my voice and is hard on the ears. And the noise cancellation mode works pretty mediocre, suppressing my voice. By the way, right now on Samsung, there's really no need to record sound using the professional camera mode. At the same time, it suppresses the background noise. By the way, now on Samsung there is no need at all to record sound through the professional camera mode. Thanks to the latest updates, the sound is recorded great even in the regular shooting mode.
And accordingly, let's move on. We're shooting with the ultra-wide lens. 4K, 60 frames per second. Both little smartphones.
And right away, the main downside of the ultra-wide on the Honor stands out. The tripod is creeping into the frame. The manufacturer placed the ultra-wide lens at the bottom of the camera block, and this lens has a focal length of 12mm. Meanwhile, the S25 Ultra has a 13mm field of view for its ultra-wide lens. And the smaller the focal length, the wider the field of view. And, of course, fingers and tripods get into the frame. By the way, the same problem existed in the previous generation, and the manufacturer did not correct the mistakes in this regard. The image quality from both cameras is approximately similar. However, I will note that even on the move, Honor's stabilization works a little better. With Samsung, we see more noticeable blurring in the image with almost every step. This problem is even more noticeable when running. The video gets blurry on both Honor and Samsung, but the S25 Ultra is definitely more blurred.
And now I'm shooting myself. With the ultra-wide lens in 4K, 60 frames per second. How do I look? Can you hear me? Is everything okay? How does the picture look overall? In conditions with less light, and we have a sunset in the background.
When filming ourselves, we can better see the difference in dynamic range and color reproduction of the cameras. The Samsung S25 Ultra has a better view of the sky, less glare around the sun, and a slightly nicer skin tone. On the Honor, the area around the sun is completely blown out, and the skin looks kind of orange. When filming ourselves, the stabilization works the same on both. Good on both smartphones. Switching to the main lens, let's see how video shooting works here. All around, we see a rather warm and dark picture on the Honor, while the video on the Samsung turned out to be colder and lighter. If we put two videos side by side, we see the strong difference in white balance. At this point, it really comes down to personal taste. Some people prefer one color reproduction of the sky over the other. Both smartphones performed very similarly. There's a bit of glare, but overall, everything looks good. We observed this in the stabilization test. Effect: the Magic 7 Pro is jelly-like, and the video is more choppy than the S25 Ultra.
And now I'm shooting myself at 1x in 4K at 60 frames per second. Both little smartphones. Again, the conditions are pretty challenging. Right now, we have a sunset in the background. I think, from time to time, the sun is coming into the frame, and it will be interesting to see how it looks at. Let's see how our little smartphones perform in these conditions.
In difficult conditions of filming myself, the results were different. Honor boosted the exposure so my face wouldn't be too dark. On the Samsung, the exposure is noticeably lower, making my face darker, but the sky in the background is clearly visible. But personally, I will still give it back. Honor's preference here, as the S25 Ultra made me look too dark. The stabilization holds up well on both smartphones. Alright, no questions there.
2x on the Honor Magic 7 Pro 4K at 60 frames per second. Also both of them on the Samsung at 25 liters 4K 60 frames per second.
At the 2x zoom, we see a strong difference in white balance again. As for video quality, Samsung has higher detail in all details. We're looking at the bushes, the trees, and the fence. The S25 Ultra performed better during the run. The Honor's video shakes more, and you can also see noticeable jumps in exposure.
Hey friends, I've just activated the movie mode on the Honor Magic 7 Pro. So, basically, this is shooting where we can blur the background. Right now, I've turned off that effect because in 4K at 30 frames per second, this mode doesn't work. It's kind of weird that the movie mode can only operate without background blur. While using the Samsung S25 Ultra, I easily activated the portrait mode for shooting. And right now, I'm shooting in 4K at 30 frames per second on the Samsung S25 Ultra with the background blur effect. I use the Honor Magic 7 Pro. Honor can use background blur, but only in video mode. The Samsung S25 Ultra has background blur. Everything should look nice.
To be fair, Honor does have background blur in this 4K mode, but it's probably optical. The Magic 7 Pro's full HD portrait mode looks quite good, and even the facial detail is on par with Samsung's. However, Honor cranks up the clarity too much, which makes the skin look bad. And I don't like the skin tone here at all either. Again, I'm somehow orange, and Samsung's not everything is perfect either. There were a couple of tricks, but otherwise I'll still give it up. I prefer the 4K video on the Samsung S25 Ultra. Stabilization worked better on Samsung, while on Honor we see background shaking. However, 25 Ultra struggles with focus again, and this is especially noticeable when flipping the camera.
It turns out that Honor has the ability to shoot with a background blur effect, but this works from video mode. So, when we swipe up from the bottom, this feature gets activated. We can set the aperture, and right now I've set it to f1.4. On the Samsung S25 Ultra, we have portrait mode video, 4K 30 frames per second. The blur is set to 5, so in theory, there should be a strong blur.
1.4 is the maximum blur available on the Magic 7 Pro, and it is noticeably weaker than the maximum blur, while the 25 Ultra is only digital, so the results turn out to be so different. Now comes the difficult test, wiring around a person, and both smartphones coped with this test perfectly. I have no complaints.
Hey guys, right now we're shooting in 4K at 30 FPS with the ultra-wide lens on the Honor Magic 7 Pro and 8K 30 FPS on the wide-angle lens of the Samsung S25 Ultra.
Samsung has the ability to shoot 8K video with both the ultra-wide and main lenses. Honor, on the other hand, is limited to 4K resolution. When shooting everything around with the ultra-wide lens on the go, it's hard to notice the difference between 8K and 4K video. Everything looks pretty much the same.
And this is how we shoot 4K 30 FPS on Honor Magic 7 Pro without the HDR effect. And Samsung S25 Ultra 8K 30 frames per second.
But when filming yourself, the difference is noticeable. The detail in the face is clearly better in 8K video. For example, in the video from Honor, you can't see any stubble on the face at all, while with Samsung's 8K, it's clearly visible. It has maintained its color reproduction. We have everything the same as before. With stabilization, both when shooting everything around and when shooting yourself 8K, works better for Samsung.
Honor Magic 7 Pro 4K at 30 FPS on Samsung S25 Ultra 8K 30 frames per second shooting at 1x and 8K.
When shooting everything around with the main lens in 8K video, there's really no noticeable advantage either. As for stabilization, Honor performs better here.
And this is how it looks when we shoot ourselves at 1x 4K 30 FPS on the Honor 3 FPS on the Samsung.
When shooting yourself, there is detail again. The faces are a bit clearer in the video from Samsung, but the difference isn't as strong as with the ultra-wide lens. But when it comes to stabilization, there are no differences. Both images hold up pretty evenly.
Hey friends, this is what the multi-video mode looks like for us. On the Honor Magic 7 Pro, we can shoot like this, full HD. On the Samsung S25 Ultra, you can't shoot in 4K at 30 FPS. On the Honor Magic 7 Pro, I can zoom in right away. For example, I'm doing 2x right now, so I can zoom in right away. On the Samsung S25 Ultra, before I choose a lens, I need to stop the recording, then select the lens, and continue shooting. The plus side for Samsung is that I can, and to turn on the HDR effect in this mode, which is really cool, of course. Also, by the way, on Samsung you can record video in two, to save two videos at the same time from the main camera and from the...
In this mode, the results on the Samsung look way better. I like that the S25 Ultra frames the video from the front camera in a neat rectangle with rounded corners. It looks nice and aesthetically pleasing. You can also see that the video quality on the Samsung is higher. This applies to both the front shooting and the main camera.
One cool thing that Honor has is that you can change the layout of the picture-in-picture. So right now, I set it up, which means we have the picture-in-picture at 1x and 2x at the same time. We have two lenses working at the same time. Now I've activated it, here it is. I'm filming myself with the front camera and capturing everything around on the wide-angle lens. Here the picture simply comes entirely from the main camera block. And the last option is when the image is coming only from the front camera. Well, overall, it's a really cool feature, for sure. You can't activate HDR in this mode on the Honor Magic 7 Pro. Again, it's unclear why. Well, most likely, the software just doesn't perform that well. And now I've activated the HDR mode, the Samsung S25 Ultra. Right now, I'm shooting in HDR. So I'm filming myself with the front camera. And I'm walking around filming everything with the main camera setup.
With backlighting, Samsung's HDR handles it noticeably better. There's way less glare here. You can see the sky better, while with Honor, it's all washed out.
Honor Magic 7 Pro 1x 4K 30 frames per second. HDR effect turned off. On the Samsung S25 Ultra, HDR is also turned off for 4K at 30 frames per second.
From the main lens in SDR video, Honor does a much better job. The sky looks perfect, no overexposure, and the skin tone comes out great. On the S25 Ultra, the sky is overexposed, and the skin tone turned out very pale.
And now on the Honor Magic 7 Pro, 4K at 30 frames per second, the main lens with HDR turned on. While on the Samsung S25 Ultra, we also turned on 4K at 30 frames per second with HDR enabled.
When HDR was turned on, the situation did not change. The Honor Magic 7 Pro's video still looks significantly better than Samsung's. Also in HDR without stopping recording, you can zoom up to 2.6x for Honor and up to 3x for Samsung. The Magic 7 Pro again has a higher exposure. The foreground is better visible, but the sky is overexposed. The sky is much clearer on the Samsung, but my wife in the foreground is hard to see. And the same thing happens if I put it on Samsung Zoom at 2.6x. At 5 times zoom, the video looks better on the Samsung. Higher quality in detail. The background is more visible, and the foreground is quite clear as well. Better stabilization. In my opinion, the Honor Magic 7 Pro has a very non-intuitive and user-unfriendly interface. What I simply did not notice during the shooting of the tests, where to turn on the log. It turned out I had to dig deep into the interface, which is, of course, very poorly thought out. So we finished shooting the log tests. We're already on another day. For Honor, we couldn't find any official paint loot from the manufacturer, so we painted it using official loot from Samsung and finished the paint job manually. The result was quite good, with a warm white balance. But when my daughter turned to face the camera, there was a noticeable jump in exposure. Apparently, the smartphone changed the lighting of the frame as soon as it noticed the face. Samsung doesn't have such a jump. The tone is colder, and the video itself is a little darker. The picture quality of Samsung is noticeably higher if we put both videos side by side. The face, air, and background look more detailed on the S25 Ultra. If you compare SDR and log on Honor, you can see that thanks to the coloring we were able to better reveal the sky. Also, the skin looks more natural, without an orange tint and not so strongly saturated. Although if we want, we can crank it up. That's what the log profile is for. There's not such a big difference between the videos on the Samsung. The colored shots turn out darker, but the color reproduction looks very similar. By the way, on Samsung, we can shoot slow motion video even on the ultra-wide lens, while the Honor Magic 7 Pro is limited to just the main lens. Honor allows shooting slow mo at 120 FPS only in Full HD, while Samsung offers 4K. The video and the quality of the S25 Ultra is noticeably better. Take a look at the texture of the surface, the swing chain, and the background objects. However, Samsung has another issue. Even in static shots, you can see the shake. The stabilization here seems like it doesn't work at all. Both smartphones shoot 240 FPS only in Full HD. Here, the shooting quality is better on Honor. Both the foreground and background look better. When shooting on the move at 240 FPS, the stabilization works better with Samsung. Although in the last review, he had big problems with this. It seems that Samsung has fixed this problem. However, Honor has a noticeably wider dynamic range. You can see the sky better and distant objects are less overexposed.
Hey guys, let's test how the smartphone performs when zooming in on the picture. I'm starting 4K at 60 frames per second, just regular video recording, hitting record, and here we go. I'm starting to zoom in on the picture now. And, well, basically, yeah, there is definitely a jump in exposure. It happens twice. First, we're transitioning from 0.5x to 1x. You can see how much the detail changes right away at 1x. So, if we look here, the trees are blurry, but when we switch from 0.9x, to 1x, you can really see the exposure change. The next jump in exposure happens at 2.6x. When we connect the telephoto lens and get here again. On the contrary, here with the main lens, the picture is brighter at 2.6x. But when we switch, it gets really dark. Well, and then here comes the approximation. We zoom in to 10x. This is on a telephoto lens, that is, it turns out that this is the kind of shooting we have. Overall, not bad. Now, let's see how this works for us. On the Samsung S25 Ultra, we start at 0.6x, and the transition to 1x is definitely much smoother here, of course. On the Honor Magic 7 Pro, this shake is definitely much stronger. Here, of course, on the Samsung, this shake is way better, at 2.9x. Now we're switching to the telephoto lens. Here, the shifka is almost completely unnoticeable, and then we have the transition to 5x. So again, the shake is slightly noticeable, but it handles it really well. And just like that, we zoomed in to 20x. You can hardly feel the video stitching on the Samsung S25 Ultra. Meanwhile, on the Honor Magic 7 Pro, you can definitely see the stitching much more clearly.
The Honor Magic 7 Pro is equipped with a 50MP ultra-wide camera with an f/2.0 aperture. The main camera is a 50MP with a variable aperture of f/1.4, f2.0, and a 200MP telephoto lens with an f/2.6 aperture and 3x optical zoom. The Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra features a 50MP ultra-wide camera with f1.9 aperture. The main camera here is a 200MP with an f/1.7 aperture. Samsung also has two telephoto lenses, one at 50MP with an f/3.4 aperture and 5x optical zoom, and a 10MP with an f/2.4 aperture and 3x optical zoom. Let's see how the lenses perform in the video test. Let's start with the ultra-wide. Here, the results are quite similar, but the text in the Samsung video is definitely clearer. Switching to the main lens, again, a similar video, but here, the Honor has a bit more noise. At 2x digital zoom, the S25 Ultra performs better. You can even see it with the naked eye, like in the texture of the tiles, for example, but the difference is even more noticeable in the details. Let's switch to the telephoto lenses. For some reason, when shooting video, the Honor telephoto lens is marked with a 2.6x zoom, although when shooting photos it is 3x. At the same time, the official website states that it has 3x optical zoom. So, why do I see 2.6x in the camera interface? It's unclear. Here, the Honor telephoto lens performs better in video, less noisy, and the clarity is a bit higher. Switching to 5x. With Honor, you get digital zoom, while Samsung activates the second telephoto lens. And, of course, the S25 Ultra delivers a higher quality result. The Honor 10X has the highest available video shooting zoom, and at this size it also loses to Samsung in terms of clarity and detail of shooting. But with the S25 Ultra, we can zoom in up to 20 times, and even like that, its video turns out better than Honor's.
Friends, both of these smartphones can take great macro shots, photos and videos, but on the Honor Magic 7 Pro, thanks to the 200 megapixel telephoto lens, we can take macro shots from afar. Unfortunately, with the Samsung S25 Ultra, macro shots taken from a distance don't turn out very well. That's how digital zooming works. Here's what we end up with.
Both smartphones take beautiful macro shots, but Honor definitely wins because of its telephoto lens. It's much more convenient to photograph small objects from a comfortable distance with it, while with Samsung, you have to get really close to the subject. If you have the opportunity to bring your smartphone close to the subject of the photo, then macro video is better, writes Samsung. Even at larger zoom levels, its quality is better than that of the Magic 7 Pro. However, if you want to shoot macro video from a distance, then the situation actually favors Honor. Both smartphones let us shoot 4K time-lapses. That's great. The colors in the time-lapses turn out differently. Personally, I prefer the more vibrant sky with Honor before sunset. But after sunset, the Samsung's colors are no worse. However, once it gets dark, the time-lapse quality from Honor is still better than that of the S25 Ultra. The video on the Samsung in the dark turned out kind of blurry. Hey friends, it's evening here, and we're going to test the photo and video capabilities in low light and artificial lighting.
As always, we start with a test of the front camera on both smartphones. Honor Magic 7 Pro, front camera, 4K 30 frames per second. Samsung S25 Ultra, shoots, 4K 30 frames per second. There's plenty of light, with street lights illuminating me from both sides, even on the front camera. The picture should be more or less okay. Honestly, I don't like the picture on the Honor screen. But Honor Magic 7 Pro has a cool thing called automatic. Let's say backlight. Right now, automatically, he immediately starts to illuminate my face. Firstly, the picture on Samsung immediately improved, because clearly, there's some light shining on my face like a rectangle, and my face is definitely better lit.
When it comes to video quality, Samsung definitely comes out on top. You can see more details on the face, and the hair looks clearer too. The skin tone on the S25 Ultra looks nicer too. I can only give Honor a thumbs up for having face lighting. However, here we immediately see a common issue. The background gets really blurry, especially when there are well-lit spots in the frame. You can see this problem even more during the run. The stabilization here is really weak. Honor has a strong background blur, while Samsung has shake.
I just stepped over here on purpose, where it's even darker. I think the picture looks pretty sad. To show how this lighting works, I'm recording the screen on the Honor Magic 7 Pro and demonstrating how this thing operates. I'm turning it on now. The automatic lighting kicks in. But honestly, because I'm recording the screen, the lighting is much worse. So, the screen recording is interfering. And that's why the picture seems kind of mediocre to me. Not very cool. I'm going to stop the screen recording now and show you how it changes right away. Video quality. I just stopped the screen recording, and it seems to me that, well, there's definitely a lot more light now. And honestly, it looks pretty good on the Honor too. The picture. But honestly, I wouldn't recommend using the front camera in low light conditions. I really wouldn't recommend shooting with it because the quality is usually not very good. Alright, folks, let's keep testing. I just set it to 60 frames per second in 4K on the Honor Magic 7 Pro. Well, 4K 60 frames per second has become much worse. In my opinion, there's just so much noise. On the Samsung, though, I think the picture looks better. I'm walking through the same place where I shot at 30 frames per second, and it seems like, well, the picture looks a little better on the Samsung than on the Honor Magic 7 Pro. Right now, by the way, I'm going to do it like this, zooming in. Well, basically, nothing has changed, right?
If we compare it with 30 frames per second, we see changes in the Honor's white balance and skin tone, but the video quality seems to have gotten worse. On Samsung, the color rendering has also changed. But here, in terms of quality, on the contrary, the video at 60 frames looks slightly better.
And now on the Samsung S25 Ultra, I turned on the HDR effect. Let's see how the picture looks, especially in the background. This is it, the blue building. How it lights up, whether it's good, and how the streetlights look.
The HDR image on Samsung looks noticeably better than the video from Honor. Less noise on the face, and overall, it's less. Better handling of light sources, and the color reproduction is nicer.
Alright, friends, we're continuing the shoot in 4K 30 FPS on the Honor Magic 7 Pro. and it's 4K at 30 FPS on the Samsung S25 Ultra. I also activated portrait mode, which means it has that background blur effect.
In portrait mode, Samsung performs excellently with pretty good quality. Video and facial detail, neat blur, smooth edges, and even while running, Samsung's portrait mode does a decent job. The background shakes, that's true, but the focus doesn't get lost.
Now we're shooting in 4K at 30 frames per second, capturing everything around us. So how's the image quality overall?
How are our little smartphones holding up? Right now it's 4K and 30 FPS.
When shooting everything around with a wide-angle lens, the video turns out really weak, the image gets blurry, and the quality and detail leave a lot to be desired. In the stabilization test, everything looks even more disappointing.
And now we're vlogging, just like that, 4K at 30 frames per second.
On both smartphones, ultra-wide lens. How do I look?
When shooting a selfie, the video from the S25 Ultra looks a bit better. Take a look at my face, my hair, and the texture of my jacket. With Honor, everything is all blurry. Both smartphones handle running poorly. Once again, the background is shaking and getting blurry. Switching to the main lens, Honor immediately disappoints with shaky and blurry video. At the same time, the video from Samsung is much smoother. And while running, the S25 Ultra also holds up more confidently than its competitor.
Alright folks, we're now vlogging in 4K at 30 frames per second using the main lens.
How's the picture looking overall? Is everything okay? So, actually, the street is pretty cool.
I like that when shooting a selfie, Honor lights up my face. But in the video from Samsung, I can barely be seen. Also, when shooting with Samsung Light, for some reason made skin tone orange, while Honor tried to keep it natural. Well, the stabilization on both smartphones worked perfectly.
We're shooting in 4K at 30 frames per second with 2x zoom.
How will smartphones work in such a situation?
When switching to 2x zoom, we get a better quality result on Samsung. Its video is more stable and doesn't have the same blurriness as on Honor. The S25 Ultra also performs better while running. I also tested shooting at 60 FPS on all lenses. On the Honor's ultra-wide screen, the picture became noticeably darker, but the blurring disappeared, and the video became smoother. Also, the lights look better at 60 FPS. You can really notice this difference while running. Samsung did the same thing. 60 frames looks darker but smoother. But when shooting myself at 60 FPS on Honor, more noise became noticeable and chromatic aberration appeared. At the same time, the stabilization didn't improve. In Samsung's case, switching video to 60 frames per second did not affect the quality in any way. Only the color reproduction changed. The stabilization has become more reliable, but the difference is slight. Now let's switch to the main lens. Honor has less blur at 60 FPS. Although it was not possible to get rid of it completely, the stabilization has become more confident and smoother. With Samsung, I really don't see any difference between 30 and 60 FPS, except that the stabilization got better too. But it's noticeable only while running. When shooting a selfie at 60 frames on the Honor, we get a more detailed result. Check out my face, hair, or the texture of my jacket. Skin tone at 60 FPS also looks nicer. It's not as orange as at 30 frames, but the stabilization worked the same. Samsung has a similar situation. 60 FPS gives a better quality result with more pleasant skin color. At the same time, the stabilization works the same again. As for shooting at 2x, there are 60 frames on the Honor. We didn't get any advantage at all. The same shake, the same blurriness in the image. Only the color reproduction changed. With Samsung, there's also no difference when shooting on the go, but while running, the picture at 60 FPS is stabilized.
Right now, I've turned on 4K at 30 FPS on the ultra-wide lens of the Honor Magic 7 Pro and
8K at 30 FPS on the Samsung S25 Ultra. So, how does the picture look?
8K in low light with a wide-angle lens looks even worse than 4K video on the Honor. The video is more blurry, with worse detail and lower image clarity, and the stabilization didn't work well on either camera.
now I'm filming myself in 4K, 30 FPS on the Magic 7.
In 8K at 30 FPS on the Samsung S25 Ultra.
How is the picture all forked? Is it completely dark right now?
We're walking down this tourist street now.
In general, there is super little light, and how does it look?
This is our content. There are our smartphones.
When filming yourself, the advantage of 8K video is already noticeable. Samsung has better detail in the face, hair, and jacket. I also like the skin tone better on the S25 Ultra, while on the Honor we see that orange skin tone again. Stabilization worked almost identically on both smartphones.
5. Now we're continuing to test 4K on the Honor Magic 7 Pro.
8K on Samsung S25 Ultra. We're filming around us.
I'm driving through a really interesting area. Such beautiful, beautiful lights.
So let's see how our little smartphones are performing.
When filming everything around with the main lens in 8K, there's no noticeable advantage in terms of detail. But I will point out that Samsung stabilizes the video better. When running, this difference is even more noticeable.
Booming in 4K 30 FPS on the Honor Magic 7
and 8K at 30 FPS.
When filming myself, I also don't see any significant differences between the 4K and 8K picture. The detail is similar, and the quality is decent on both cameras. Both smartphones perform well even when you're running.
And here's our favorite mode, a movie, on the Honor Magic 7 Pro at full HD 24 FPS.
And a portrait video Samsung S25 Ultra, 4K, 30 frames per second.
Portrait video looks great on both smartphones. The blur is even, the foreground is clear and high quality. But Honor, I'll give it a like for its nicer skin tone and for always trying to keep your face lit up. As for stabilization, both smartphones did pretty well. Let's test the video zoom in low light. With the wide-angle lens, the S25 Ultra gets better results. The detail is higher, and the colors of the same fountain are better preserved. There's less glare from streetlights and signs. And when zooming in, we can even read the small text on the Samsung. Main camera 1x. Here, the results are very similar in overall quality and detail. 2x digital zoom works better on Samsung. The detail and clarity of the video, better on that one. Switching to the telephoto lenses, 2.6x, Honor and 3x for S25 Ultra. Magic 7 Pro, it does a little better at this size as it makes less noise. At 5x zoom, the Samsung activates its second telephoto lens, and it leaves the Honor with no chance. 10x zoom, the sign on the Honor is completely washed out, while the Samsung keeps it readable. Yeah, and the detail on the S25 Ultra is higher. On the Magic 7 Pro, that was the last zoom level. But with the Samsung, we can zoom in to 20x, and still get a readable and quality result even in these conditions. I also tested the zoom with HDR turned on. I can say that it doesn't give us any significant improvement. Switching to a higher frame rate didn't give us any benefit. On the contrary, the video only got worse. There was a lot of noise at all zoom levels. We see the same thing on the Samsung.
We're currently shooting on the ultra-wide lens, 4K at 30 frames per second.
HDR turned off, and this is what the picture looks like.
Now I'm stopping the recording and showing how this works.
This is what it will look like with HDR effect.
HDR video looks pretty similar on both smartphones. It's extremely similar. The main difference is just in the white balance. On the Honor, the video is a bit warmer, the skin tone is richer, and the face is darker. On the Samsung, the background has a greenish tint, and the skin tone is paler and lighter. At the same time, the background on the S25 Ultra looks better. it's not as dark as on the Honor. Also, the Samsung has slightly less glare from light sources in the building in the background.
Right now, we are shooting at 1x on the wide-angle lens, the main lens.
4K, 30 FPS, HDR off. How does it look overall?
My beloved wife's face, what the background looks like. Is everything okay?
And now I'm going to turn on HDR, and let's see how the picture looks in HDR.
And this is how we're shooting, with the HDR effect on the Honor Magic 7 Pro at 4K, 30 frames per second.
In the Samsung S25 Ultra, 4K, 30 frames per second.
HDR on the main lens looks better on Honor. The skin tone is more pleasant. There is less glare in the building in the background, and overall the picture is more contrasty and saturated.
And now we're shooting on the Honor Magic 7 Pro in 4K at 30 frames per second with HDR.
On the Samsung S25 Ultra, 4K, at 30 frames per second, it's logarithmic.
The logarithmic profile of the S25 Ultra doesn't look very good in contrast to the HDR video from Honor. However, it should be taken into account that we did the painting with official loot from the Samsung website, and maybe if you tweak it manually, you could get a better quality result. And now I suggest we move on to the photo tests. In the first photo, we can see just how wide the front camera on the Honor is. The smartphones handle photos differently. The Magic 7 Pro enhances the image much more intensely than Samsung. The next selfie is in more difficult conditions, and here Honor already shows itself better. Samsung knocked out the sunset sky to my right, while the Chinese flagship kept the information. We can conclude that the Magic 7 Pro has a wider dynamic range on the front camera. In the next photos, the difference is again just in color correction. Overall, the selfies turn out well on both smartphones. Let's take a look at the portrait selfies. In the first photo on the left, we can see that Honor applies aggressive sharpening, excessive saturation, and contrast. Both smartphones have issues with the blur along the hairline, but it's within acceptable limits. In the next photo, the picture on the right looks more natural, and the one on the left looks more artistic. Whose option is closer to you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I would like to note an important thing. Honor's front camera has a wider viewing angle, which is really cool. But this can also be a downside, since selfies are primarily about capturing the face, and the proportions can vary with different focal lengths, which can make the face look quite different in the end. The light is fading, and the sun is setting. In these conditions, both smartphones perform pretty well. However, Samsung has better detail in the first photo. Check out the details of the face. We're on my sweater. At the same time, the S25 Ultra has a bit more noise in the shot. Honor does a stronger job of smoothing the skin and actively enhances the photos. I can say the same about the second photo with my daughter. As for the blur, both smartphones have some minor issues at the edges. Let's take a look at how the portrait mode works on the main camera setup. The main camera shows a decent depth of field and blur overall. The edges of the blur are also handled quite neatly. When it comes to color, the processing on Honor is just too aggressive. The situation is similar with the double zoom. Once again, the photo on Samsung turned out to be more natural. Honor has a more saturated and processed look. The same story repeats itself at 3x zoom. We observe the same thing in other sizes. Now let's look at the same focal lengths, but with a male portrait. True, Honor didn't quite figure out that there was a man in the portrait, and for some reason he painted my lips in all the photographs. Honor added their smartphones, portrait profiles, and photography developed in collaboration with Parisian photo studio Archer. And, apparently, during the shooting of the portrait, this was the profile that I had enabled. I can't explain the lip coloring any other way. Let's sum it up. Samsung and its photos look much more natural and organic compared to photos from the Chinese flagship. In portrait mode, Honor uses evaluative metering for exposure and makes the subject a bit brighter, but this can affect the background. Samsung, on the other hand, uses center-weighted metering and provides a relatively even brightness in the image. But because of that, the subjects in the photos don't stand out so much. Honor saturates the photos more, and some people might like that kind of color grading. As always, it's a matter of taste.
Friends, we've come to a little cafe to do our favorite spoon fork test. Let's go!
Here, we're testing how the smartphone performs in portrait mode with thin objects like a spoon, fork, or straw. As we got closer, Samsung started to blur the handle of the spoon more than its Chinese competitor. Honor, on the other hand, did quite well in this test and only made one mistake. Let's see who does better when zooming in photo mode. On the ultra-wide lens, photos look relatively good. It seems that Honor struggled a bit more with the bottom line on the boat, but you can see pixelation on both sides. The main cameras of the smartphones give almost identical results. We don't have a clear leader here. On 2x Honor works definitely better, leaving all the text readable, 3 times the approximation, and here again we have no clear winner. Both smartphones handled the task equally well. Alright, 6 times zoom on Honor and 5 times on Samsung. The photo on the left is softer, while the one on the right is sharper. But Samsung has a pixelated border on each letter. However, he did a better job on the roof and other parts. At 10x zoom, as well as all the other zoom levels going forward, it definitely favors Samsung. Honor's algorithms struggle with text at that level of zoom and just create a picture. On the photo to the right, the details are more visible, more clearly. Yes, the Korean flagship also enhances some things with artificial intelligence, but it looks better overall. Now let's evaluate how our smartphones capture landscapes. In ultra-wide shots, both smartphones take good and interesting photos. In scenarios like this, I think the vibrant colors of Honor look the best and highlight all the interesting details. Images. But Samsung isn't thinking about falling behind. Its more subdued color reproduction also looks really interesting. Again, it's a matter of taste. The main lenses also capture photos in a similar style. The photos on the left are sharper, brighter, and more vibrant, and the photos on the right look more natural and softer. In all the photos using zoom, we are also unlikely to be able to determine the leader, since the photographs are comparable in terms of detail and overall quality. The only difference is in the color correction and how the devices process the shot. But I want to clarify that Honor doesn't take sharper photos at these focal lengths. It just has increased sharpness by default during processing. Guys, I really don't recommend watching this. This comparison is on an empty stomach. Samsung has a special mode for food photography that works really well. Honor doesn't have a dedicated mode, but its artificial intelligence automatically recognizes food in the frame. The S25 Ultra takes appetizing photos, but with natural colors. But the photos from the Magic 7 Pro are just way too saturated. Yeah, in some places it looks even better, but overall, I think Samsung does a better job. Both of our smartphones can take photos without post-processing, which is called RAW. This shooting method allows you to save images straight from the camera sensor so you can edit them yourself later. The shot is just how we want it. Both smartphones take high-quality photos with a wide dynamic range and handle exposure and color gamut well. In fact, in this mode, Honor pleasantly surprised with its results, which are definitely not worse than Samsung's RAW expert. But what the Chinese smartphone disappointed with was the ability to shoot RAW only on the main lens. And that's just not up to the level of a flagship device, which is how Honor positions itself. Yeah, maybe with the next update we'll be able to choose modules for RAW shooting, but right now that option just isn't available.
Hey guys, these smartphones have a cool feature, which is burst shooting, and we're going to test it out right now. Honor really promotes this mode as something super cool in their ads, so let's go ahead and test it out now. First, we're going to test the burst shooting on these smartphones as well as action shots. Let's see how it goes. Today, our main star is the badminton player Maika, and now I'm going to hit the shuttlecocks, and let's see how our shots turn out. Alright, let's go. On our Magic 7 Pro, there's this little running guy. I'm activating it now, and just like that, we have multi-burst shooting. The HD Super Burst feature is on, and now we're going to take some photos. When I press this button, we're going to get a whole bunch of shots.
The burst photo mode on the Honor really looks great. The smartphone takes a lot of shots. The shots come out clear, vibrant, and contrasty, with a good dynamic range. There don't seem to be any issues with focusing on a moving person either. Samsung has a similar shooting mode, but the results aren't as interesting as those from the Magic 7 Pro. Honor has the ability to take live photos, but this feature looks pretty basic compared to the animated ones. Photos on Samsung. With Samsung, we can customize different variations of such a shot. There are looping photos or, for example, slow motion ones. Samsung was clearly inspired by the live photo feature on the iPhone. We're done with daytime photos. Now let's move on to shots in low light. Let's start with selfies. In the first photo, I like the result of the Samsung S25 Ultra. It has a nicer skin tone, there is no yellowness in the background, and overall the photo looks better. Now, I'm taking portrait selfies. For the first photo, I'll give the edge to the shot from Honor. The result is more vibrant and contrasty, and it handled light sources and the sky better. It has a darker tone, just like when shooting video in low light. The same goes for taking photos. Selfie photos, Honor pleases with the presence of a ring-shaped face light. Unfortunately, Samsung doesn't have such a useful feature. Now we're taking a photo of a person with the main camera setup. For now, no blur. Honor makes photos very contrasty. The sky turns out darker, really night-like. By the way smartphones work with flashlights is also important. And in this regard, I like the result on Honor better. It has fewer glare spots from the flashlights, and the highlights look really cool. At closer zooms, we see that Honor is starting to finish drawing the face, and this is noticeable. And the closer we zoom in, the worse my face looks. I really don't like the skin tone that the Magic 7 Pro produces either. Samsung also noticeably improves photos at the largest zoom levels using algorithms. And you can clearly see that it awkwardly touched up my eye. It happens, sometimes. Now we're taking portrait photos with the main camera setup in low light. At all zoom levels, Honor gives us a very rich and contrasty result, heavily enhancing the skin, and the skin tone itself doesn't look very pleasant, but that's a matter of taste. As for the quality and blurriness, I have no complaints here. The boundary of the blur, it's neat, and there are no issues with the hair. We're testing photo zoom. With the wide-angle lens, the photo looks better on Honor. It's clearer, more contrasty, and handles light sources better. However, the detail is about the same. Switching to the main lens. Again, the results are about the same, so let's zoom in. Next, the 2x digital zoom also gives us similar photo quality. At 3x zoom, the telephoto lenses kick in. Honor seems to handle light sources better, while Samsung tends to overexpose them. We see the same thing at the next zoom level. The Magic 7 Pro again performs better with lights and signs, but Samsung has a bit more detail here thanks to the telephoto lens. At 10x zoom, Honor again does a better job with the illuminated sign, while Samsung again has advantage in detail. At 30x, the results are about the same, except the S25 Ultra has slightly better clarity in the photos. The maximum 100x zoom performs better on Samsung, and it reads smaller text better, like numbers for example. Now we take landscape photos. In the first picture you can see how much Honor colors the sky and the shade. It turns out to be some kind of dark turquoise. I'll be honest, the color is not for everyone. Overall, both smartphones give us great results across the board. Simply honorable, saturates and adds contrast. And of course, because of that, its photos look more interesting. I can say the same about the shots taken with the main lens. By the way, the wide-angle lens works better with a light source on the 25 Ultra. This can be seen, for example, in this photo with a lantern, I took a photo zoomed to 3x. Here, in my opinion, the photo is better with Honor. Awesome, vibrant sky, and the lighthouse beams are sharp and bright. Looks awesome. Samsung also delivers excellent results, and for instance, it shows the foreground, the grass, and the greenery with the boats better. So, it really comes down to personal taste. I tried to photograph the lighthouse with an even closer zoom, 6x on the Honor and 5x on the Samsung. The difference is huge. It seems like Honor has it. The photo is out of focus, and the lighthouse itself is completely overexposed. With Samsung, we can see the lighthouse building itself and the top part with the light source much better. Both smartphones can take beautiful photos of the moon, or rather, both are good at enhancing them. However, up to 30x zoom, neither Honor nor Samsung really show the moon, but they start with 30x. The result is stunning. With Samsung, the moon looks more natural and a bit blurry, while Honor cranks up the sharpness to the max and enhances the color. The moon, almost to the color of Mars. Doubtful, but okay. We're taking raw shots in low light. The results are pretty similar. Some photos look better from the Honor, while others look better from the Samsung. At times, both show noticeable noise in the sky and other dark areas. The Honor Magic 7 Pro camera has various creative features. For example, there's a preset shooting scenario here, long exposure photos. Samsung does not have such modes in its camera, and we can only take photos with long exposures using Expert RAW. In the end, it's much easier to take those kinds of photos with Honor, and the quality of the shots turns out better. In this regard, Chinese smartphones always turn out to be more convenient and user-friendly than Samsung's flagships. We're testing the upload photos on Instagram by your requests. When uploading from Honor, there are absolutely no noticeable changes in the color reproduction of the shots, but the photos from Samsung got a little boost on Instagram, adding more vibrancy and contrast. So, how's the battery holding up after the shoot? The smartphones are draining at about the same rate, with a difference of just 1 to 2%. The Honor Magic 7 Pro has a 5,850 mAh battery, supporting a charging power of 100W wired and 80W wireless. By the way, the global version for the European Union has a battery of only 5,270 mAh. I have that exact version. The Samsung battery is even smaller, at 5,000 mAh. It offers 45W wired charging and 25W wireless charging. The heart of the Honor Magic 7 Pro is the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite with a clock speed of up to GHz. The graphics are handled by the Adreno 830. The Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra uses the same Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite, but with the 4 Galaxy branding. It has an increased clock speed of up to GHz, and the chipset is optimized for use with Samsung smartphones. The graphics chip is the same as the Honor's, the Adreno 830. Let's run some tests. Let's talk about the performance of our smartphones. Let's start with the Untitled test. Samsung handled the test faster and scored significantly more points than the Honor Magic 7 Pro. Let's see how the smartphones perform in the Geekbench test. First, we're measuring the performance of the processors in single-core mode and in multi-core mode. In the end, the Samsung S25 Ultra scores higher in both metrics in this test. Now let's test the graphics chip. And here, Honor has a slight advantage, although the lead is really minimal. Guys, you mentioned in the comments that the speed of the network can be affected by which server the smartphones connect to. So, the speed measurement isn't really fair. But I can't change it in the speed test app. The server couldn't, no matter how hard it tried. If you could give me some tips in the comments on how to do this, that would be great. Let's measure the mobile network speed. Both smartphones have the same SIM cards from the same carrier, network 5G. In the end, the Honor showed a slightly higher result than the Samsung, with a difference of about 70 megabits for download and around 30 megabits for upload. Honor Magic 7 Pro has an LTPO OLED display on inches with a 120Hz refresh rate and supports Dolby Vision and HDR Vivid, and the nano crystal shield protects the screen from damage. The Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra features a 1-inch dynamic AMOLED 2X with an adaptive refresh rate of 1 to 120Hz and HDR10 plus support, and it provides reliable protection against scratches and damage. Corning, Gorilla, Armor 2. Let's measure the PWM ratio. At maximum brightness, we see less than 10% PWM in Honor, while Samsung has more. 36%. At half brightness, the Magic 7 Pro has a PWM just over 11%. Samsung's figure remains unchanged. At a brightness of about 10%, Honor records 13% PWM, while Samsung has almost 35%. At minimum brightness, the Magic 7 Pro still impresses with its low PWM ratio, just 14%. At the same time, the Samsung's ratio has risen to nearly 70%. In the settings of the Honor Magic 7 Pro, there's a whole section called Honor AI, where we can check out all the AI features. The first feature is Magic Text, which lets you highlight, copy, and transfer text from images. There's something called Magic Portal, which has a feature similar to Circle to Search, along with easy handling of text, images, and screenshots. Honor also introduces AI translation, which works like translating the direct speech of your interlocutor. But unfortunately, there's no call translation feature like on Samsung here. There is a smart control feature that adjusts the sound, screen, and screen lock depending on where you are looking. There is also a convenient function for taking a photo and controlling photos using gestures. By the way, one of the advantages of Honor is the presence of a Face ID-like feature called 3D facial recognition. This feature is more secure and a more reliable way to unlock than the regular face unlock on many other Androids.
I bought this Honor Magic 7 Pro smartphone with 512 gigabytes, the global version, on the official Honor website in Spain for about 1,000 euros. And the package with this smartphone also included a case and a 100-watt charger, which, of course, was very nice. Honor Magic 6 Pro. I also bought it in Spain and for about the same price. That is, I paid 1,099 euros for it. But there was also a watch as a gift. Now on the official Honor website, there was a slightly different promotion. And with the promotion, you could buy a watch, a fitness bracelet, and also headphones from the Honor company at a discount. And I did that, so in total, I ended up paying just over 1,100 euros. But in the end, this smartphone cost me about 1,000 euros, which, of course, isn't exactly cheap. So let's figure out if this smartphone was worth the money. Guys, the first plus I'd point out about this little smartphone, the Honor Magic 7 Pro, really shines when it comes to audio recording. In the previous generation smartphone, the Honor Magic 6 Pro, there was a really big problem with the sound. If it started to blow slightly, the wind, the noise, the video was terrible. This time, Honor worked on the mistakes and made a good sound recording. Yes, of course, it is inferior to the sound recording from Samsung, because here the sound recording, I won't hesitate to say it's the best on the market. The second plus. Now, with the Honor Magic 7 Pro, you can shoot 4K at 60 frames per second on the front camera. On the Honor Magic 6 Pro, you could only shoot at 30 frames per second. The next plus. Guys, this is really interesting. You can shoot with the main lens. And now, when shooting video, even in 4K 60 frames per second, you can use an aperture of f1.4 and at the same time blur the background. That is, as if shooting a portrait video, you can do optical blurring of the background. I haven't seen such a thing in other smartphones. They mostly have software blurring. Of course, the blurring is not as strong as in Samsung, but here it is software blurring, and here it is optical, and I think that's another plus for Honor. I really enjoyed shooting video with the main lens in HDR in challenging conditions. The picture quality on this smartphone is very good. I like the picture quality better than on the Samsung S25 Ultra. Even though the smartphone's main lens performs really well, I also liked the new HD burst mode on the Honor Magic 7 Pro. We tested this mode, burst shooting, and every shot looks great. The smartphone handles moving photos really well, while the Samsung S25 Ultra can't handle this mode. Although continuous shooting, the Samsung S25 Ultra has 100 frames of the quality of the photos we took on the Samsung. In burst shooting, really falls short compared to the Honor Magic 7 Pro. They also put a new telephoto lens in this little smartphone, and it actually performs really well. I really like taking macro shots and portraits with this smartphone, but the only thing is that you have to fine-tune the portraits a lot, because it really makes the skin look unreal. I'd also consider stabilization in good lighting conditions a plus. On the front camera and the ultra-wide, the Honor Magic 7 Pro actually handled stabilization even better. Samsung. In almost all tests, the Honor Magic 7 Pro lasted longer than the Samsung S25 Ultra. And of course, the brand new processor, Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite. So friends, we talked about the pros. Now let's talk about the cons. On a smartphone, you can only shoot RAW with the main lens in Pro mode. This, my friends, is just not serious. Take, for example, a smartphone from Samsung. We can easily take raw photos from a super wide lens on each lens to a 5x telephoto lens, and we can also shoot raw on the front camera, shooting video on the camera on the main camera block itself. The skin tone was just awful. It was carrot colored. The skin looked super unnatural. Honor is really overprocessing the image right now. By the way, the same problem was with the portrait shots. In the portrait photo, it just went ahead and made my lips look all made up. I don't know why this is happening or how to turn it off. Even though I turned off all the enhancements, the face retouching, I was removing that at the time. I don't know what to show here. What's going on with the white balance and color correction? Of course, I think that Honor will continue to improve its smartphone and firmware, and I hope that in the next updates, there won't be such face color correction. The next downside is that, unfortunately, in this smartphone, aside from this new telephoto lens, they didn't add any new lenses. Honor has revamped the camera module. On the Honor Magic 6 Pro, I actually like this camera block more. Here, they revamped it, but again, they moved the ultra-wide lens to the very bottom. It was just painful, my friends. And on top of that, the focal length here, 0.5x, is a really wide angle. And I always had a tripod. I had to do it like this. If you hold it calmly, your finger may get caught in the screen, which is super inconvenient. I absolutely do not understand why Chinese companies, even in this form factor, cannot remove the ultra-wide-angle lens upwards. By the way, Vivo managed to do this with the Vivo X200 Pro Mini and move the ultra-wide lens up in that same round camera module. Smart companies always do this, like Samsung, where their ultra-wide lens is at the top,
and Apple does the same. The same goes for the interface. Friends, it's a real pain. When I took the Honor Magic 7 Pro, I generally thought that there was no logarithmic profile here, but it turns out that there is. You need to tap on the little arrow in that inconspicuous mode. I don't know at all why Chinese manufacturers make it so inconvenient to call up additional shooting menus. It's super inconvenient. The Magic 6 Pro. That logarithmic profile was really easy to access. You could call it up without any hassle. That is, I pressed the Pro mode, activated the top curtain, video shooting. It was very convenient to activate the logarithmic mode. And it was also very convenient to activate HDR. Right now you click on that little arrow up and it opens an additional menu where you can choose. But I really don't get why it's like this in photo mode. We have shooting is done with a telephoto lens at 3x. And in video mode shooting is done at 2 and 6x. Friends, why is it so unclear? Slow motion full HD 120 frames per second in 2025 in a flagship smartphone is, friends, not serious. While absolutely now take any manufacturer, it has been doing this in 4K, 120 frames per second for a long time. Why can't Honor still implement 4K shooting, 120 frames per second? I just don't get it. In addition, we cannot shoot slow motion video on the ultra-wide lens and are limited only by the main lens. Although the shooting itself, I really enjoyed shooting in full HD at 120 frames per second with this smartphone. And let's also talk about the different modes. In the last video about the Honor Magic 6 Pro, I mentioned that they have a ton of unnecessary modes that really don't make any sense to use. Let's take, for example, the night mode. This mode can easily be implemented in photo mode. Are there any special settings in this mode? I still haven't seen the night mode. I took different shots at night mode, just like the photo mode shown. Very similar results. I honestly don't get why they made it a separate mode. Aperture. I absolutely don't get why this mode is needed. In this mode, you can only take photos. You can't record video. This aperture mode only works on the 1x lens. In my opinion, these extra non-functional modes just complicate using this smartphone. The next mode is super macro. To be honest, I still don't understand the joke in this mode. When I activate it, again, I can only take photos. And, accordingly, the shooting for me. It's only available on the wide-angle 0.5x, 1x, and 2x. So that's it, zooming in further. I can't. I honestly don't get why this was implemented. Yes, I tried taking macro photos in super macro mode, and to be honest, I wasn't really happy with the result. In normal photo mode, the result looks much more interesting, since a telephoto lens is connected. Let me remind you that the telephoto lens here is 200 megapixels, which takes very cool macro shots. And that's why I think this super macro mode is just not needed at all in this smartphone. The next mode is seen. Again, guys, what's the point of this mode? I tested this mode, and to be honest, I didn't really notice much difference from the regular video mode. I still didn't see it. Yes, by activating this mode, we can shoot 4K 30 FPS by default. Yeah, so I can't just set it to 60 FPS. But the quality, video and photo quality in this mode did not give any advantage. I think the company Honor was inspired by scene mode from Vivo. But in Vivo, in this mode, for example, in video shooting, we can zoom up to 30x, which cannot be done in video mode. And then it makes sense. This mode is a scene from Vivo. It is as logical and correct as possible. While I still don't understand this mode from Honor. Honor still can't take a front camera photo with a background blur effect. Honestly, I don't get why that is. Other Chinese manufacturers allow for this kind of shooting, at least in full HD. Considering that this phone has a really good processor and graphics chip, it's a shame that they haven't implemented it here. And the movie, shooting with artificial blur. You can do background blur, but again, only with the main lens, and only in full HD at 24 frames per second. That's where the good blur kicks in. The software blur. Yeah, the smartphone. Not bad. It blurs the background, and it works well with hair. And I like the picture in this mode from this smartphone. It was pretty good, but unfortunately, only in full HD. Almost all Chinese flagships can shoot in 4K. Who would I recommend this smartphone to? First of all, this smartphone might appeal to all the owners of the previous generation or other older Honor smartphones, since many aspects of the new model have indeed improved for those people for whom it's important. Face ID on Android, because here this Face ID is very similar to Apple's Face ID, and this feature even works in banking apps. Really cool. Guys, well, here's the main question. Would I buy this brand new Honor Magic 7 Pro for myself right now? And my answer is definitely no. I wouldn't buy it for myself. because I think there are much better Android smartphones on the market than the Honor Magic 7 Pro. If you love taking photos and videos, then it's definitely better to go for one of these. Vivo X200 Pro. Whether it's the global version or the Chinese version or the Vivo X100 Ultra, these are amazing smartphones that take the best photos and videos. But if you want to get everything in one device, then of course, it's better to consider a smartphone from Samsung. This smartphone cost me 1,000 euros for the 512GB version. At that moment, I could have bought myself a Samsung S25 Ultra for 1,300 euros. Yeah, 300 euros is quite a difference. These smartphones are from different weight classes. The Samsung S25 Ultra is a top-tier flagship that allows you to do some unreal things that other Android smartphones still can't do. The video here is amazing. The photos are stunning. They really uprated the X1 UI 7, especially for photos in low light. From the perspective of AI, Samsung is currently the leader in the market among all the smartphones I've had. While Honor, there are also some cool e-features. I actually like some of the e-features and how they're implemented here, but nothing really gave me that wow factor. Out of these two smartphones, I would definitely go for one of them, Samsung S25 Ultra. Hey friends, if you liked this video and found it helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and definitely let me know in the comments what you think about the new Honor Magic 7 Pro. And see you later. And everyone, bye bye.